Imagine this. You're stuck in traffic on a Monday morning. The car in front of you isn't moving, your coffee's gone cold, and your boss just texted you about a deadline you totally forgot. Your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty, and you're mentally screaming at the world to just get it together. Sound familiar? We've all been there, those moments when life feels like it's spiraling out of control, and no amount of honking or cursing changes a thing. Now, what if I told you there's a way to sit in that traffic jam, sip that cold coffee, and still feel calm? Not fake it till you make it calm, but real deep down peace. That's what Stoicism offers, a way to let go of the chaos we can't control and find stillness in the storm. Welcome to The Art of Letting Go, a Stoic's Guide to Peace. I'm your name, and this is the kind of wisdom we're unpacking here on the Daily Stoic Mindset. Today, we're diving into a story, a real, relatable tale about a guy named Mark, who's just like you and me, wrestling with life's curveballs. Through his journey, we'll explore how the ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, figured out how to let go of what doesn't serve us and hold on to what really matters. Ready? Let's get started. Mark was a 34-year-old sales rep living in Chicago. The kind of guy who'd give you the shirt off his back, but also stress about whether you'd like the color. He had a decent apartment, a girlfriend named Jess, and a job that paid the bills and paper. Life was good, but inside, Mark was a mess. He worried about everything. If a client didn't reply to an email within an hour, he'd assume they hated him. If Jess was quiet at dinner, he'd spiral into thinking she was about to dump him. And don't even get him started on the news. Every headline about the economy or politics sent him into a tailspin. Mark wasn't a control freak in the bossy sense. He didn't micromanage people or bark orders. No, his problem was quieter but heavier. He couldn't let go. He clung to every worry like it was a lifeline, as if stressing about it would somehow fix it. Traffic jams. He'd fume for hours. A rude co-worker. He'd replay the conversation in his head all night. Mark thought that holding on mentally, gripping every problem meant he was in control. But here's the kicker. It was controlling him. One day, it all came to a head. Mark was at the grocery store, juggling a cart full of stuff for a dinner he'd promised Jess. His phone buzzed a work email about a missed quota. Then a jar of marinara sauce slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. Red sauce everywhere, people staring, and Mark just froze. He wanted to scream, cry, or maybe both. Instead, he abandoned the cart, walked out and sat in his car, hands shaking. That's when he realized, I can't keep living like this. Later that night, Mark slumped onto his couch, scrolling through his phone for some kind of distraction. Jess was working late, and the apartment felt too quiet. He stumbled across a quote on social media, something about, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." It was credited to Marcus Aurelius, some old Roman dude Mark vaguely remembered from high school history. Intrigued, he Googled it, and 10 minutes later, he'd impulse bought a copy of Meditations on his Kindle. The next morning, bleary-eyed but curious, Mark cracked it open over coffee. He wasn't a big reader. Self-help books usually felt like preachy nonsense to him, but this was different. Marcus wasn't telling him to manifest positivity or hustle harder. Instead, the guy was blunt. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Mark read that line twice. Was this ancient emperor saying that his freak-out over marinara sauce was his own fault? At first, Mark bristled. Easy Uber Eats, he muttered, imagining Marcus in a toga with a smartphone. But as he kept reading, it clicked. The traffic, the rude co-worker, the spilled sauce, none of those things cared about Mark's feelings. They just happened. He was the one turning them into disasters in his head. For the first time, Mark wondered, what if I just let go? A few days later, Mark got his chance to test this Stoic stuff. He was driving to a client meeting downtown, and surprise, surprise, Chicago traffic was a nightmare. Cars honked, construction blocked 2 lanes, and his GPS kept rerouting him into more gridlock. Normally, Mark would have been gripping the wheel like it owed him money, muttering curses at every driver. But this time he remembered Marcus's words, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." He took a deep breath and asked himself, what's actually in my control here? The traffic? Nope. The construction? Not a chance. His reaction? Bingo. So instead of fuming, Mark turned on the radio some cheesy 80s station and let his shoulders relax. The cars didn't move any faster, but something weird happened. He didn't feel like punching the dashboard. He wasn't happy about the delay, but he wasn't miserable either. He was just there. When he finally got to the meeting, 10 minutes late, he apologized calmly, made a joke about Chicago roads and moved on. The client didn't care. They signed the deal anyway. Mark walked out feeling lighter than he had in months. Letting go didn't fix the traffic, but it freed him from the mental cage he'd built around it. For the first time, he saw what the Stoics meant. Peace isn't about the world behaving. It's about you deciding not to fight what you can't change. Mark's traffic breakthrough felt like a win, but life doesn't let you off that easy. A week later, he hit a bigger bump and he couldn't just breathe through with a Bon Jovi song. Jess came home from work one night, dropped her bag on the counter and barely said a word. Mark asked how her day was, and she snapped, "Fine, okay. I just need some space." Then she disappeared into the bedroom and shut the door. Mark's stomach dropped. His old self would have spiraled instantly. "She's mad at me. She's done with me. What did I do wrong?" And spent the night overanalyzing every word he'd said that week. But this time, he grabbed his Kindle and flipped back to meditations. Marcus had something for this too. When you are annoyed at someone's mistake, immediately look at yourself and reflect how you also err. Okay, not exactly a relationship manual, but it got Mark thinking. Maybe Jess wasn't mad at him. Maybe her day sucked and she just needed to decompress. Instead of knocking on the door or stewing in silence, Mark made a choice. He heated up some leftovers, left a plate outside the bedroom with a little "take your time" note, and went to watch TV. No pressure, no guilt trips, just letting go of the need to fix it right then and there. An hour later, Jess came out, plate in hand, and sat next to him. "Sorry I was a jerk," she said. "Work was a disaster." They talked it out, and Mark realized something. He didn't have to control her mood or even understand it to keep the peace. The Stoics were onto something. You don't own other people's feelings. Mark was starting to get the hang of this letting go thing, but the Stoics had more to teach him. One evening, scrolling through a Stoicism subreddit, he'd gone down that rabbit hole, he stumbled across a phrase, amor fati. It's Latin for love of fate, and it hit him like a freight train. The idea, don't just accept the stuff life throws at you, embrace it. Love it, even. Not in a cheesy, everything happens for a reason way, but in a gritty, this is my life and I'm not going to waste it fighting reality way. Mark thought about the grocery store meltdown. The spilled sauce didn't ruin his day because the universe hated him. It just happened. Gravity, slippery jars, bad timing. Could he love that? Maybe not the mess itself, but the fact that it woke him up to how tightly he'd been clinging to control. Yeah, he could work with that. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus popped up in his reading next. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. Mark scribbled that in a notebook. It wasn't about giving it was about choosing peace over pointless resistance. The next day, his boss called him into the office. "Sales are down," she said. "No bonuses this quarter." Old Mark would have panicked, picturing eviction notices and ramen dinners. New Mark? He nodded, said, "Got it," and walked out. He didn't love losing the bonus, but he loved that he could handle it without falling apart. Amor fati was his new secret weapon. Mark was feeling pretty good about his stoic progress, but he wanted to push it further. Enter Seneca, another stoic big shot who had a trick called premeditatio malorum, basically imagining the worst-case scenario ahead of time so it doesn't blindside you. It sounded dark, but Mark saw the logic. If you're ready for the storm, it's just rain, not a disaster. He tried it one morning over coffee. What's the worst that could happen today? His car could break down, Jess could dump him, his boss could fire him. He pictured each one really felt the sting of it. Car trouble. He'd call a tow truck and figure it out. Jess leaving. It'd hurt like hell, but he'd survive just like he always had. Fired. He'd update his resume and hustle for something new. The exercise didn't make him paranoid, it made him tough. By letting go of the fear of what if, he took away its power to wreck him. That afternoon, his car did start making a weird noise. Normally, Mark would have freaked out, cursing his luck. This time he laughed, actually laughed, and pulled into a mechanic. "Guess I called this one," he told the guy. 2 hours and $200 later, he was back on the road, unbothered. Seneca was right. When you've already faced the worst in your head, the real thing's just a speed bump. Mark's biggest test came a month later. He was at work, pitching a sale to a client who'd been stringing him along for weeks. Mid-call, the guy cut him off. "Look, Mark, your product's fine, but your competitor's cheaper. We're going with them." Click, hung up. Mark stared at his phone, heat rising in his chest. After all that time, meetings, follow-ups, late nights tweaking the proposal, this jerk didn't even give him a heads up. He wanted to call back and unload, or at least slam his desk and vent to whoever was nearby. Then he remembered Seneca's take on anger. No plague has cost the human race more dear. The Stoics didn't say anger was wrong. They said it was a waste. It doesn't fix the problem, it just burns you up. Mark took a breath and asked himself, what's in my control now? The client's choice? Done deal. His reaction? Still his. He grabbed a stress ball, squeezed it a few times, and let it go literally and figuratively. The sale was gone, but his peace wasn't. Later, he told Jess about it over dinner. "I'm proud of you," she said. Old Mark would have been, ranting about that guy for days. She was right. Letting go of anger didn't win the client back, but it saved Mark from a week of misery. Seneca would have approved. Mark was riding high on his stoic when traffic jams, spats with Jess, even lost sales didn't faze him anymore. But life has a way of testing you just when you think you've got it figured out. One grey Tuesday morning, his boss called an all-hands meeting. The room buzzed with nervous energy as she dropped the bomb. "The company's restructuring. Some of you won't be here next quarter." No details, no names, just a vague promise to follow up soon. Mark's stomach flipped. His jobbis, steady paycheck, his routine could be gone. Back at his desk, the old Mark crept in. What if I'm cut? How do I pay rent? What do I tell Jess? His mind raced, spinning worst-case scenarios like a broken record. But then he caught himself. He'd been here before, mentally, at least, thanks to Seneca's premeditatio malorum. He'd already pictured losing his job over coffee that one morning. This wasn't a surprise attack. It was a chance to practice what he'd learned. Mark grabbed a notepad and jotted down what he could control, updating his resume, networking, saving a little extra cash this month. The rest, the company's decision, the economy, his bosses. Mood out of his hands. Marcus Aurelius whispered in his head, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." Dramatic, sure, but it stuck. Losing his job wouldn't be the end of the world, it'd just be the next thing to deal with. By the end of the day, Mark wasn't calm exactly, but he wasn't a wreck either. He'd let go of the panic and held on to his power to act. The next few weeks were brutal. No word from the boss, just rumors swirling around the office like bad coffee. One co-worker swore he'd seen a layoff list. Another said the company might close entirely. Mark's inbox stayed quiet, and every day felt like a tightrope walk. He could have obsessed, checked his email every 5 minutes, grilled colleagues for gossip, but instead he leaned into another stoic gem. patience. Epictetus had a line for this. There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. Mark couldn't speed up the company's decision, so why waste energy fretting? He kept showing up, doing his job, and letting the chips fall. At home, he and Jess watched old movies, cooked cheap dinners, and avoided the what-if talks. It wasn't denial, it was deliberate. Worrying wouldn't save his job, but it would ruin his nights. One evening, Jess noticed the shift. "You're different," she said, stirring a pot of chili. "Last year, you'd be pacing a hole in the floor by now." Mark grinned. "Blame the Romans. They're teaching me to wait without losing my mind." It wasn't easy. His brain still tried to drag him into doom spirals, but he'd catch it, redirect, and move on. Letting go of the need to know right now was like flexing a new muscle. It hurt, but it got stronger. 3 weeks later, the email came. Mark saw the subject line, "Update on your role," and his heart thudded. He clicked it, skimmed the corporate jargon, and landed on the punchline. "We regret to inform you that your position is being eliminated, effective next month." There it was. Done. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. No bonus was one thing. No job was a whole different beast. For a split second he felt the old Mark clawing up anger, fear, the urge to email his boss a rant about loyalty and fairness. But then he remembered amor fati. Love your fate. This wasn't what he wanted, but it's what he got. Could he embrace it? Not the unemployment part, nobody's that zen, but the chance to start over? Maybe. He thought of Seneca. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Losing the job sucked, but it wasn't the end of Mark. It was just a turn. In the road, he called Jess, told her straight up, "I'm out, layoffs hit me." She paused, then said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." No pity party, no panic, just teamwork. That night, they sat on the couch with a laptop, tweaking his resume and laughing about how he'd list Stoic philosopher as a skill. Letting go of the job didn't erase the sting, but it opened space for something new. Mark wasn't sure what yet, but he trusted he'd handle it. The next month was a blur. Mark filed for unemployment, hit up old contacts, and applied to anything that didn't sound soul-crushing. Some days were rough rejection emails piled up, and the bank account dwindled. But he kept the Stoic toolkit close. When a recruiter ghosted him, he'd shrug and echo Marcus. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Obstacles weren't stop signs, they were the path. One afternoon, a buddy from college called with a leader small startup, needing a sales guy. It paid less than his old gig, but it was remote, flexible, and sounded fun. Mark nailed the interview, leaning on his chill, stoic vibe to stand out. They offered him the job on the spot. It wasn't a jackpot, but it was a start. He took it, grateful not just for the gig, but for the grit he'd built to get there. At home, things shifted too. Jess started opening up more, inspired by Mark's calm under-pressure thing. They weren't perfect, money was tight, and stress still crept in, but they faced it together, letting go of what they couldn't fix and focusing on what they could. Mark realized stoicism wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about bending without snapping. And that was peace. Mark's new job was settling in smaller paycheck, but less stress and more freedom. He and Jess were adapting too, cutting corners where they could and finding joy in the little things, like takeout nights turned into home-cooked experiments. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Still, Mark kept digging into stoicism, hungry for one more piece to lock it all together. That's when he stumbled on Memento Mori, Latin for "Remember you will die." It sounds grim, right? Mark thought. So too at first, but Marcus Aurelius framed it differently. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. It wasn't about fear, it was about focus. If time's finite, why waste it on petty grudges or endless worrying? Mark sat with that one night, staring out his apartment window viet the Chicago skyline. The traffic jams, the lost job, the spilled sauce, none of it would matter when he was gone. What would? The people he loved, the moments he lived fully. The next day he called his mom just to chat, no agenda. He hadn't done that in months. They laughed about old family stories, and Mark hung up feeling lighter than he had in years. Later, he took Jess for a walk by the lake. No phones, just them and the wind. Memento mori didn't make him morbid. It made him present. Letting go of the small stuff wasn't just about peace. It was about making room for what lasts. A year after, the grocery store meltdown. Mark barely recognized himself. He still had bad days, traffic still sucked, and the new job had its headaches, but they didn't own him anymore. When a coworker snapped at him over a missed email, he shrugged it off. With Seneca's wisdom, you're not mad at them, you're mad at your own reaction. When rent went up, he and Jess brainstormed solutions instead of panicking, channeling amor fati to roll with it. And when he caught himself stressing about the future, memento mori snapped him back to now. Jess noticed it most. You're like a human chill pill, she teased one night, curled up next to him on the couch. I should thank those dead philosophers, Mark laughed. They'd probably say, don't thank them, just live it. And he was. Stoicism wasn't a magic fix. It was a practice. Some days he nailed it, some days he slipped. But the slip-ups didn't derail him. He'd let go of needing to be perfect and embraced being Mark. One evening, he found that old Meditations Kindle file and reread the line that started it all. You have power over your mind, not outside events. It felt like a full-circle moment. The chaos hadn't stopped life, never does, but Mark had. He'd stopped fighting what he couldn't change and started owning what he could. That was the art of letting go. That was peace. So where does that leave us? Mark's story isn't about a guy who became a superhero or won the lottery. It's about a regular dude, someone like you or me, who found a way to breathe easier in a world that loves to throw punches. The Stoics gave him the tools. Ditch the worry over what's out of reach. Love the life you've got. Prep for the worst without losing sleep, and remember time's too short for nonsense. It's not flashy, but it works. That's what we're all about here at the Daily Stoic Mindset. I'm bringing you stories like Mark's real, raw, and packed with ancient wisdom you can use today. If you're ready to let go of the chaos and grab some peace, hit that subscribe button. We've got more coming, tales of grit, lessons from the Stoics, and practical ways to keep your head straight when life gets messy. Stick around. The next story's waiting.